In theology, we like to talk about topics. The technical name for topic is a locus, and the plural is loci. A topic is a theme around which theological statements cluster. For example, Christology is one of the topics, and in Christology, you get all the questions about the person of Christ. Historical questions, biological questions, metaphysical questions, all of that kind of thing. So Christology as a locus or topic will answer all the questions about who Christ is. The reason we have topics in theology is to make it easy to see which theological questions are related to which other theological questions, and also to see how they influence one another. So all of the Christological questions, everything that's in the same topic, they're all related to one another. But then likewise, the topics are related to one another in specific ways. And when you see how the topics are related to each other, it then helps you understand how to think about the relations between those smaller questions within each of the topics to each other. For example, Christology is deeply related to atonement, to such an extent that I often will teach Christology and atonement together, because essentially Christology is asking the question, what type of person is Christ? And atonement is asking, what type of work did Christ have to do? And many times we answer the question, what type of person is Christ, on the basis of the work that he was sent to do. Famous example, Anselm, who wrote Why Did God Become Man? He argues that what Christ needs to do, the job description, if you will, for Christ, is to be one who can, as a human, repay the debt that humans owe and that it's only fitting for a human to pay back. But he then also needed to be God so that he would have something to give to God that he didn't already owe to God. And only by having both of those things would he be able to make satisfaction for the human race. And so you're seeing there the claims about who Christ is, that he is divine and human, are in very close conversation with claims about what did he come to do. This project of making and examining topics and seeing the relations within topics and between topics and all of that, this project is what I call systematic theology. Systematic theology aims to think through the revelation of God insofar as that revelation is an interconnected whole. It's about looking at theology as a system and seeing the connecting tissue and how that deepens our understanding of it, but also opens new avenues for further understanding and reflection. Now, traditionally, there are about 7 topics of theology. There's not total agreement about how many topics there are or which ones are which, but the taxonomy I'm going to give you is one that is fairly traditional, has been used a lot. And these are those 7. The first one is the doctrine of God. The doctrine of God is the topic that contains all the questions about what God is like, which includes all questions of Trinity. What is the Trinity? How do we understand that? How can we make sense of that? All of that stuff falls under this first topic of the doctrine of God. The second doctrine is the doctrine of creation. And creation contains all those questions concerning what types of creatures there are and what those creatures are like. Everything about their nature. And then there's the doctrine of the fall. How did it happen? What are its consequences? All of that kind of stuff. That all clusters on the doctrine of the fall. The fourth topic is Christology. The relation of his divinity to his humanity. The different phases in his life, whether pre-incarnation, the eternal word, or incarnate and walking around on earth, what my teacher used to refer to as the earthly career of Christ, or resurrected and glorified, and at the right hand of the Father, where he remains for all eternity. Lots of questions to ask about that. For example, does he take his body and his soul up there with him to heaven? And so does he have a body even now? Did he even have a soul? All of these are Christological questions. And then the fifth topic is atonement, which is to say, given what was said over in the doctrine of sin about the fall, what's the nature of the problem the ongoing problem that we have as humans that's got to get solved? And what will it take to solve that? What would count as a solution to that problem? What's the job description? And how did Christ do it? Well, even once we know, okay, so Christ has got to do this. He's got to be able to take away the sins of the world by being a sacrifice. Okay, so how does him dying count as the sacrifice that we need? All those questions are atonement questions. The sixth topic is grace. Grace is both the nature of grace, the life of grace in Christian sanctification, the means of grace, sacraments and things like that, as well as how grace functions. Right? What does it do? Does grace work apart from our will? Does it work with our will? Does it come before our will? Does it come after our will? Is it resistible or not? All of those kinds of things. Does it come and go? And then the last topic is eschatology, the doctrine of the last things. It's the end of the story, which includes all that we say about heaven and hell, purgatory, limbo, whatever other things there are to think about the final state of things when God has completed his story and brought it to the glorious conclusion, which is really a glorious beginning. That is all under eschatology. Now, I mentioned that there are some other things that people have thought were theological loci in the past, theological topics, and think today. That there's no agreement about what the topics are. I'm not invested in trying to convince you that you have to think that these 7 and no others are the theological topics, or there have to be 7 or anything like that. What I really want to do is show what some of the other candidates are and indicate where in this series that we're doing here I'm going to talk about those things. So one of the leading sets of candidates, for example, ecclesiology. What do you say? What is the church? How should it be run? Who should be in charge of it? Who can be ordained? How does worship go? All that kind of stuff. That and also sacramentology. Are there sacraments? If so, how many are there? What are they? How do they work? What's the nature of the grace they contain? All that stuff. Both ecclesiology and sacramentology I'm going to talk to you about under the heading of grace. There's also pneumatology, and pneumatology is kind of an interesting one. That's the study of the Holy Spirit, right? What we say about the Holy Spirit. And it's a fact that in church history, the Holy Spirit has gotten much less airtime than either the Father or the Son. I think there's really good reason for that, actually, but it's something that some theologians are really trying to intentionally focus on pneumatology today to say, hey, we need to kind of balance the sheet a little bit here and give the Holy Spirit his due, so let's reflect on him more. After all, the Holy Spirit is the one who dwells in my heart. The Holy Spirit is the one who is left behind to guide the church into all truth. It's the sign of the Holy Spirit that we're living under now. We are the Church of Pentecost, which is when the Holy Spirit was sent. That's what kicked off this whole church age. So shouldn't we say more about him? I'm going to handle the Holy Spirit under the doctrine of God. I'm going to treat that as part of the doctrine of God. You can see why you wouldn't want to, because Christology is separated from the doctrine of God. However, I think one of the reasons for that is with Christology, yes, he is fully God, but there's also an aspect of Christ that isn't God, namely his humanity. And so the fact that he's God and man creates a whole set of questions that don't apply to the Trinity as a whole. I don't think the same thing is, well, certainly that same thing is not true of the Holy Spirit, who never, as far as we know, became incarnate. But I think for that reason, speaking of the Father and the Holy Spirit together under the doctrine of God, as you're also speaking about the pre-incarnate Christ, I think that makes a lot of sense. You could also have the question of revelation. What's the nature of revelation? What counts as revelation? How often should you expect revelation? Is there still revelation? How do we know that we're getting revelation? How do we judge and assess whether something really is revelation? I'm going to talk about that, various questions that you might cluster under a topic of revelation will show up in creation or Christology or grace. And then lastly, there's the study of particular rational beings, angelology, demonology, anthropology, right? What are angels and demons and humans? What are they like? What are their possibilities? Can they be saved or not? What does it look like for them to be saved? All of these types of questions. We're going to handle all that under the doctrine of creation, which is the doctrine that deals with the fundamental natures of things, of created things. So that's a good way to think about how to organize a systematic theology, if you will. And I'm going to use it to organize the next set of videos, where we're going to take one video and dive deep into each one of these 7 topics. And in so doing, I'll give you an overview of some of what's cool about each of the major areas of theology. So go ahead and subscribe, and also click like on this video, and get ready to dive deep into the doctrine of God.